Because I said what was on my mind. I made a lot of enemies. I made a lot of enemies.
Welcome, everyone, to Science from the Fringe. It's a very special episode on this Sunday night. I'm Bryce Nickels. I'm a professor of genetics at Rutgers University, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Anish Koka. He's a doctor in Philadelphia, a cardiologist, who has been at the forefront of, well, actually, sorry, I should also point out that you are not only a doctor. I botched this because I just asked you, what else do you want me to
That's
talk
okay.
about? And I'm so excited to talk about Vinay Prasad. I went right over it. The point is, you're also a very important member of the public health discussion on social media and on Substack. So you have a Substack, and you also are the co-host of a weekly, or is it a weekly podcast?
Yep, just a weekly medical policy, health policy podcast.
Right, and it's called the Doctor's Lounge Live. So he does it
Yes.
live, unlike this, which is recorded, and I can edit and post to make myself look better. So you're much braver than I am with respect to the podcast recording. But I appreciate you taking time out on Sunday evening to come on the Science from the Fringe podcast and talk to me about something that's got me very fired up, which is the fact that they finally took out Vinay Prasad. And I guess I have a lot of thoughts about this that are perhaps not as informed as you are with respect to the medical piece of it, but you wrote a really great essay that I'd recommend everyone read. You posted it both on X and on your Substack, and it's called How Vinay Prasad Came to Washington and Why It Was Always Going to End This Way. Tell me a bit about that article and what your take is on what happened with Vinay Prasad at the FDA.
Thanks for having me on the show, Bryce. I've been following your activity quite a bit as well, and you're clearly a fellow traveler on many things in terms of what There's a tribe of folks that seem to be very interested in being close to the truth, or trying to get to the truth and stuff, and it certainly seems like you're one of those folks. So thank you for having me on the show.
Appreciate you saying that.
I've been, I was actually shocked when Vinay was selected to be in the FDA, because he hasn't had really a role in government. But I've come to know Vinay over the last, 8 or 9 years, as somebody who really is very incisive and very sharp in terms of his ability to critically think. And it particularly came to the fore during the COVID times when, the political tribe that he usually rides with, which, by the way, is an anti-pharma, academic anti-pharma political tribe that he usually he's at UCSF, which is certainly no hotbed of, free market pharma bros or anything like that. He, kind of broke from the ranks of everyone around him, which took a lot of courage to do that at UCSF in terms of some very specific COVID things that became very politically coded. So masking kids and everyone else forever, closing down schools, lockdown. So, Vinay was, looking at this, and he's a smart guy and a bright guy and is evidence-based, and was saying, okay, there's certainly some definite downsides here to doing all this. Where's the evidence to suggest that there's some big upside? Are we going to really stop a respiratory virus? Have we ever done this before? These basic questions that he asked that kind of broke him from that he clearly was somebody that just doesn't follow along. He's not a sheep. And so he, he obviously the political winds changed, and we had the election results that we had, and I guess Marty Makary, and who was friends with Vinay, essentially brought him on because he similarly thought Vinay was kind of like a very bright guy who does this stuff. And Vinay has, for the longest time, this is well before COVID, has been talking about the slipping evidentiary standards at the FDA in terms of allowing a lot of therapies that are either marginally better than standard of care or not better than standard of care get through the FDA approval process, and then suddenly you have reimbursement lined up, and suddenly people are getting these drugs and we don't even know whether or not they work, or they're hyper expensive and they're just marginally better. And so Vinay, in many ways, was the perfect person to go there to kind of, as an outsider, to kind of look at all this and say, hey, what's going on? And so, that's what he went there for. Folks like me were looking for Vinay to take a different approach to what the FDA had been doing, and which he did. And of course, the moment he started doing that, he just ran into just buzzsaw after buzzsaw after buzzsaw. So Vinay got fired once, because of his tangling with a company called Sarepta, which I mean, that story, if you want to get into, we can. But then this most recent egregious event was with another company, another two companies, Moderna and UniQure. And again, Vinay is right on the science. He got the science right in every one of these major issues. But I mean, remarkably, the ecosystem that exists there is so sympathetic to any pharma that he wasn't able to fight the political headwinds. He wasn't able to fight the media and fight the pharma lobby all at the same time. So he was basically put on notice. Marty Makary announced Friday, after one of these kerfuffles with a company called UniQure, that was on the heels of that, that he was going to go back. He was done with the sabbatical and he was going to go back to UCSF, and thanking him for what he did.
His sabbatical. Let's
Right.
be fair. Like, I don't think this was, here's the thing. What happened to Vinay Prasad is egregious. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's, I think history will look back and just marvel that he could last more than a day there.
Yeah.
The amount of chutzpah this guy, I have so much respect, knowing a
Yeah.
little bit about how DC operates and knowing some of these people there, whatever. It is insane what he was able to endure, how long he was able to be there. And I also think it's a testament as well to Marty. I think Marty Makary was very advocated, understood, like, Vinay Prasad's a rare person of integrity with this sort of the principles that are so, you just can't, he has core principles that he's unwilling to bend to sort of appease people, to try to reach some sort of compromise that doesn't align with those. I don't, to me, it's just exceptionally rare. It's so rare. So I think it's obvious, like you pointed out, it was going to always end in some way like this. And it has happened. But I do think that hopefully, looking back at this, history will remember him for what, like, that this 10-month or whatever was a testament to the extreme integrity he has. And I think people misunderstand, or like sort of misinterpret, the concept of integrity. They maybe like confuse it with agreeing with somebody or whatever. I'm not talking about agreeing with him or that he's always right or that he's a nice guy and isn't rude. I'm talking about someone that has like core beliefs and principles and is unwilling to bend because of it's better for him personally, or he can just, that's what I'm talking about with respect to him. It seems like his level of consistency in what he was saying has been the same for years before he arrived. And then when he got to FDA, he stuck to it. He stuck to it. And so I was just so impressed just following it just from the outside, but knowing a little bit about how the dynamics in DC are and the pressures that can come, especially at the FDA, where there's a lot of financial incentives to approve things or whatever. And so there's a whole lot of things to potentially discuss related to him. I was wondering maybe if we could start at the end here to ask if you think he was potentially set up. I mean, I don't want to start a conspiracy or whatever, but it looked to me that the last thing that happened was this meeting where he was put on with a bunch of journalists. And then this is now being used as a matter of accusing him of breaking the law or whatever. It to me, it looks it just looks to me like he was set up because he's an honest guy who's going to tell you what he thinks. And then this is being characterized as him, breaking the law or whatever. I don't know. If you think that's unreasonable or whatever, let me know.
No, I mean, look, everyone has their biases. Obviously, I'm biased because, I have my biases because obviously I agreed with many of Vinay's stances during COVID. But yeah, no, I mean, the guy, and here's the one thing that I'll say is that I didn't expect this to go this way. I mean, I think Vinay's done a great service in terms of being a guy that held to core principles. When you do that, you have this, he's basically uncovered this crazy nexus that exists. This rare disease loophole that I'd love to talk about. This idea that that all these legacy media establishments that cover the FDA, cover science, right? They're not just observers. They're actually players on the field that are acting on some interest, whether it be political, whether it be because they're so aligned with the company. I mean, and he's done such a service to doing that. Of course, he's been, run through the ringer for that. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, it's very rare to get a guy like that because normally you get somebody that goes there, right? And they're just there to put some rubber stamps on and then, go to their golden parachute and, end up in some pharma company as some consultant making, 400, 500, 600K a year. Because why? Because they've got all those connections and they can tell them what to do. And I think that's been going on for so long. That's why these evidentiary standards have slipped. I mean, why else would that happen, right? I mean, it's insane to me that Janet Woodcock was apparently CBR director for decades or something like that. It's like, what person, what type of person, how does one stay in that role for so long? Well, now I know. And then that's thanks to Vinay, because I really had a lot of respect for the FDA and the institution prior to this. And I'm sure there are a lot of good people within the FDA. I'm sure there are a lot of people trying to do the right thing. But there's clearly the group that is in charge, or the group that is calling the shots, and this happens at academia all the time, right? There's lots of good people in academia, but there's that 10-20% of folks that basically ruin everything and are the rotten apples.
Prior to Marty's appointment as FDA commissioner, one of the things that was striking to me was what really mattered to the people who were talking to him about what he was going to do at the FDA. That is to say that the senators that were talking to him about his vision for the FDA, one of the things that they were really was really important to them was Peter Marks. What I didn't understand that. Why are they so concerned about Peter Marks? And it's clear because Peter Marks was in charge of controlling the approval of these drugs. And for many politicians, it just seemed like the most important thing was to maintain Peter Marks in that position. And it, as you point out, it's clear why. Because
Right.
he was good for business, good for the pharmaceutical business. But it was clear that when the most important thing for senators is not a vision for the FDA, it's really about, will this one guy maintain his job? Something's off.
Right.
And that's what we had.
I have this interesting timeline. I mean, so on this timeline, May 2025, he's named CBR director, right? He actually, later on in May writes a policy, a framework piece in the NEJM about vaccine and and this is what started the problem, right? But right off the bat, he goes with the new vaccine approval philosophy is it's going to require placebo-controlled efficacy, not just immunogenicity, right? Because you've had COVID boosters have been approved based on just immunogenicity things, which don't necessarily correlate with protection, right? So Prasad is saying, he's complained about this the entire time. Prior to being CBR director, he comes in and writes this thing, and that starts the alarm bells going, right? Because of course, all these vaccine approvals are like the prior administration has said, oh, immunogenicity is okay. They've slipped that evidentiary bar, and Vinay is trying to raise it. Then July 2025, there's a death in a rare disease group of folks called it's a disease called muscular dystrophy, Duchenne's, horrendous disease. These young boys mostly die as their muscles kind of waste away. People die in their mid-20s, late 20s, and it's 100% fatal. And there's a company, and this heralds this is the first time it became obvious to me what was going on. So the company is called Sarepta. And there's the gene therapy they have is called Elevidys. Elevidys is the gene therapy that is supposed to help these kids and in some ways change the natural history of their disease progression. All right. Now, it turns out that Elevidys probably doesn't work, and that the data that led to its approval was very, very, very patchy. All right. On top of that, but there's this whole thing about, well, it's a horrendous disease, everyone's dying, like just give me something because there's some hope, right? And here's the issue with that, which again, speaking to folks with in the rare disease communities, is that there are downsides to some of these therapies, right? And I mean, your gene therapy is not some, oh look, let's put this thing in and boom, everything is fine. No, these are highly immunogenic vectors that they travel with. And so there's, tons of liver inflammation and liver injury that's noted, right? And so on July 2025, there's a third death with Elevidys. Not one, not two, it's a third death. And Peter Marks had essentially approved Elevidys, and not only approved Elevidys, he then expanded the approval to boys beyond what was originally tested in. So originally it was marked for boys that were still ambulatory, right? Peter Marks said, look, we're going to also extend it to those who are non-ambulatory. And older kids. And multiple kids die, right? And with that third death, again, it seems obvious. So you can see to a guy like Prasad, he's like, this is what I was born to do. This is what I'm here to do, right? He goes to attempt to halt, Elevidys, that drug. And that's the moment. And I think Prasad at that point thinks that that's what I'm supposed to do. That's my job. And everyone's going to support me doing that. And that's when he runs into this dynamic of the moment he goes and lets the company know, hey, you need to voluntarily halt your drug. Elevidys, Sarepta goes to the rare disease community. The rare disease community sends multiple letters to congressmen. Stat News, which is one of the legacy media outlets that covers the FDA
it's a propaganda
science.
Wing for pharma, both
Right.
big and small. And it's an outlet where if you're at the FDA and you'd like to take somebody out, you can leak stuff to them and they'll publish it. And if you're working at the FDA and you want to get somebody out, you can try to weaponize their reporters. It's gross and disgusting, and I challenge the Stat News reporters to try to defend themselves for what they are, because they know what they are.
Yeah.
I'm just that the Stat News, clearly all it is like people have agendas and they can, hey, the emails that get leaked to them, people at the FDA who want to get rid of their colleagues, they go to them. That's what it is. It's not media.
Yeah.
It's just, this is a game. This is
Yeah.
there's no benefit for there's no effort to try to make things better. It's just some stupid game to these individuals.
They're deeply embedded, certainly,
Yes.
with the FDA and deeply embedded with pharma. So they have CEOs, I'm sure, on their Rolodex. FDA folks who have been there for 20 years all know who to contact when they want to leak something that's whatever, right? So Prasad, the request is voluntary halt. This is July 18, 2025. He's been on the job 3 months, right? And again, he thinks this is what he's supposed to do. Then it's like media frenzy. And then suddenly there's this piece that appears, right? Legacy media is doing their thing, Stat News is doing their thing about chaos at the FDA. My God, what's Prasad doing? God forbid he stop a treatment that's killing kids that was shakily approved based on the fact that, who knows if it works or not. I mean, just basic stuff. Laura Loomer from out of nowhere writes this like very detailed piece talking about PDUFA deadlines and all this insider stuff. That like, how the heck does Laura Loomer know this? Clearly, this is a story that has been planted, pre-written, and given to. I mean, I'm speculating, but I'm 90% sure about this.
She's mission driven. I was actually thinking about the Laura Loomer piece of this before we talked. I think she actually has a clear mission of alignment, like trying to support Trump and everything.
Yeah.
And so if you go to her with this guy said this crap about Trump,
right?
That's part of her alignment to say, you know what, I'm going to take him out.
Yeah. She was used. She was probably used.
And it worked.
Yeah. He was forced out directly from the White House, apparently. The White House contacted him directly or someone close to him directly and said, we had to ask for your resignation or whatever.
And guess what? Guess what happened? You know why I respect Marty Makary?
Yeah.
Because he fought for him. Marty fought for the guy. He said, I need this guy. And he put his reputation on the line to bring him back.
Yeah.
That's why I respect Marty.
Yeah. No, a lot of respect for Marty for standing up for Vinay at multiple points in this whole thing. So then now it's, November. So Vinay Prasad basically goes quiet for a while, right? And then
Right.
November 2025, he actually writes, and it's so frustrating to me to see the last 2 days of like stories from like academics with like Prasad is horrible at politics and he was a mean person and that's why he failed. I'm like, there's no way the guy, he was engineered to fail. It's like, even the Stat News thing that I can't bring myself to read, some obit by Matthew Herper about like, Prasad attracted criticism. I'm like, attracted criticism? You guys literally had your knives out from the moment he got there. You like went to his house, right, with a bazooka and
Right.
tried to like, blow it up. Anyway, so Prasad, I'm bringing this all up because November 25, he writes the plausible mechanism pathway, in the New England Journal of Medicine, which is a framework for ultra rare diseases where RCTs aren't feasible. And these guys won't cover that. It's so maddening. And most of the academic folks who are like politically just, coded, right? There's like, Trump appointee Prasad, good job. I'm so glad that he's gone. It's like, great guys. I'm so glad that you've gotten rid of this guy who was on your side, basically, because, you guys all hate pharma and anyway, whatever. So Prasad writes this piece in November 25, outlining the fact that he's not some RCT absolutist zealot. Right. There's also baby KJ that happens sometime during this time, again, under the Prasad FDA, where baby KJ is this kid in CHOP with a super rare metabolic abnormality who's sitting there, who's like dying. She's some, newborn baby. And the FDA approves, for the first time ever, giving gene therapy, to this kid, and the kid's ammonia levels drop and they go home. It's supposedly, it's amazing. And that happened too, like under this FDA. So this idea that like Prasad is this RCT absolutist who like couldn't play politics properly. No, it's complete BS. There's nothing that guy could have done that would have ended anything different. December 2025, 12 former FDA commissioners write in about, the chaos at the FDA, some nonsense. And then February 2026, now we're coming up to what's happening now, is the Moderna refused to file letter where Prasad basically overrules staff at the vaccine division or whatever of CBER, saying that, hey, this Moderna new flu vaccine, it's problematic, and I don't think we can basically go ahead with this without you guys agreeing to do different data. Now, I mean, this is the part that's a little complicated because, of course, Moderna is saying, look, we got an assurance prior that it was okay to run this particular trial with this particular comparator. Prasad, I'm sure, would say, well, there wasn't any guarantee of that. There's a specific, I wrote about this as it happened. There's something called the SPA, Special Protocol Assessment. Apparently, that is what you need to have if you want some type of close to binding thing. Outside of that, you're just kind of like, the FDA recommended one comparator. Moderna chose a different one, a much weaker comparator, which was, again, shady. And so, again, in all these cases, you see Prasad clearly has a scientific point, and Prasad thinks he's doing the right thing by preventing weak or BS stuff coming to the market that'll end up in people's arms, right? Like, do you know what flu vaccine you got? or like, we just go and we just get whatever flu vaccine, right? So one of those flu vaccines, in this particular case, the Moderna one, could potentially be very weak or not effective even, right? So it's not even an anti-vax thing, which is what it was painted as.
The problem is, I don't think a lot of people want to engage on substance here. And so that's why, to me, like, I don't know, pointing out aspects of his career arc that demonstrate the tremendous amount of integrity this guy has. You point out in your article that in a rare move, he put his name on this decision rather than having it be buried by one of his subordinates so he could have plausible deniability. He takes ownership of stuff. Like, by every measure, this guy is different. He acts different. He wants to take accountability. He wants to own his decisions. He wants to stick with this. He also, by coming to this job, didn't like financially, he sort of took a hit here, right? Because I think
100%.
he had this very, the thing is, I'm not like trying to be like, Vinay Prasad's great support or whatever. I don't know him. I met him once. I used to be one of the people in academia who were like mocking him and stuff because I was an idiot, because I was just following along with, my peers that were like, oh, look at this guy. So he's just, I don't know. Like, I think he's like uniquely high, like his intelligence is extreme, right? Like the guy's, Marty refers to him as a genius. He's extremely smart, but he's very, like people don't like him personally. He comes across as a jerk sometimes, perhaps, and he can be a little angry when he gets fired up or whatever. I'm not sure how much that weighs into people's opinions of him. I think for all of his, whatever people don't like about him, if they judge him on his actions and his consistency, he is just special. I'm sorry, but this guy is special and should be like, I am a big fan of his now.
I mean, I've never met the guy. It's just, and by the way, and early on, Vinay blocked me in like 2017 or 2015 or something like that because we were arguing about thresholds of evidence or something, right?
Well, this is interesting. I wonder, so here's the thing. The challenge to him is, he does a podcast by himself. I will say he's going to go back and he's going to do this podcast by himself, and he does a great job. He got great production or whatever. The one time I interacted with him, I did say to him, look, I just want to do a show where we just argue about any given topic. Like, just pick a topic. I want to argue about it with you because I think it'd be fun, and I know you're going to win. I know you'll win. So let's just do that. He did. I think so the one thing I don't know about him is how willing is he to sort of like, change his position in the face of and I think the answer, my understanding is he actually is, but it's quite difficult to do that with him because it's not like he has very like, I would say like superficial opinion. Like his opinions are based on deep thought and consideration and years and years. So changing his mind is not something that's easy to do. And he's super intelligent and he's confident, but he's principled. So good luck trying. I don't know. Like maybe we just start the Prasad fan club or something. We can have like our own show where we challenge him to come in. But I didn't realize. Oh, so you'd actually never met him or spoken with him either.
No. I think we've exchanged the messages periodically, but no, I've never met him. Yeah. So I think he assumed. I think he gets a lot of incoming stuff because he's so. He's so, when he writes in a very incisive way. He's not somebody that hems and haws about this, then this.
No.
He's like, no, I think this is what I think is, and he takes a sharp stand, and then a bunch of people rain down ad hominems on him. So I think he assumed I was bad for it. But over time, I think he realized that I was not. I was just actually had a different opinion, and he likes hearing opposing opinions, as far as I can tell. As long as you're not like calling him, stupid or something like that. But anyway,
that's what most of the criticism about him has been, that he's like an impolite, and he,
acerbic,
and of course worse, recently a couple of weeks ago there was a false accusation of sexual harassment in multiple papers. Like that's just, okay,
journalistic malpractice, man. I mean, it's insane.
And no one will face accountability over that.
Yeah. Right. So this whole Moderna thing kind of blows up, and because he has this refusal to file letter, and the story is not. This is the thing that's so frustrating to me about the news media that's supposed to speak truth to power and whatnot. It's like the story is not about the science of what Vinay is saying. The story is, we need regularity, and this is chaos, and so it's framing him constantly as this chaos agent, and biotech is under threat. When the guy, look, I would be the first one if baby KJ is dying, and you got experts in the field that are like, let's try this. Okay, let's do that. But but he never did that. He did things when the evidence clearly showed that there's a problem here. So that's when this Wall Street Journal editorial comes out, and in the Wall Street Journal editorial, which there was an editorial about him every 2 weeks or something insane, allegations about sexual harassment, which 2 weeks later are quietly walked back, and again the journalist is still employed. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Then that was mid February when this Moderna thing happens. And by the way, because of all the public pressure, or I don't know the details, but then finally there's an agreement that's made at the next meeting with Moderna and Prasad which basically it says, okay, we will approve, but you must agree to do a post-marketing, post-approval trial with an appropriate comparator or something like that. And so fine. Like, what was the big deal? Why make all the fuss? Then comes the next problem, which is UniQure, which, they have a drug. UniQure is a drug that has a company that treats Huntington's disease, and they have a drug called AMT-130, which is a gene therapy. This is an Amsterdam company. It's a gene therapy. This gene therapy for this horrendous condition, Huntington's disease is a neurodegenerative condition where, like, onset is at 40 and something like everyone is dead in like 10 or 15 years. It's a horrendous condition. You just lose your mind slowly over the next 10, 15 years. It's awful. And UniQure has a drug that you have to make burr holes into the skull and then a deep brain injection to give the therapy to where it needs to go. And the problem for UniQure is that in 2019, their sham control randomized control trial did not show benefit at 1 year. There's no benefit at 1 year.
By the way, it is a bad, like, sham control sounds like something that is like, what can we come up with a different name for that? Like,
Yeah,
what is a
right,
sham? Like,
right.
sham control means it's not a control. Like, so what the heck? Can you explain
Yeah.
a sham control? Because I
Well-
think either of sham as like a scam
Yeah.
or I think of sham wow. I don't know if you remember sham wow
Yeah.
back in the day.
Yeah, right. So the problem with procedural testing procedures, right, is that, like, we have this with cardiac catheterizations. When you do a cath on somebody and you put a stent in someone into some artery, right? So you do that, you show them the artery, and you show them the artery is beautifully open, and then you go and test them afterwards, right? Simply that knowledge that, oh, my heart is great, my blood flow is awesome, right? Now, if you put them on a treadmill and have them walk on that treadmill, all right, there's a very good chance that simply the feeling of, oh my God, my heart is much better, they will do more, right? This is the placebo effect. So the placebo effect, when it comes to drugs, okay, you give them either a pill that doesn't have active drug, or you give them and the patient thinks they could be getting the active drug. They don't know, right? And so you can control for that. That's the standard double-blind randomized control trial where neither researcher nor patient know which drug they're getting, right? And so that's how you test the actual effect of a drug. Now, the problem for procedures, when it comes to procedures, it's how do you test that? Because if you don't do a procedure on somebody, the patient will know they didn't get the drug, or they didn't get the therapy, right? So
Right.
so the only real way to test something like Huntington's, which Huntington's is like, year 1, you can go up, year 2, you can go down, then you can, it's steadily, everything is going down, but there's like this staggered thing in terms of how it may happen, The only way to really test it, because when you're testing these folks to see if they're improving or not, is things like motor function, how much they walk, how their energy levels, etc. Right? There's this composite score thing. That composite score is highly susceptible to placebo effect, right? So if people think they're getting the therapy, right, they may push themselves more and do X, Y, and Z more and make the
Right.
scores look better. So the only way to really test that, to see how much is this working or is this placebo, is to pretend to do some type of surgery. And so the patient still is not sure whether or not they got something or not. It's not perfect. So in 2019, they did that. So that when they say sham control, they're saying they're doing a sham surgery, because you don't want to actually drill burr holes into the brain and then do a
Right.
deep brain injection and not inject anything, because that would be unethical. So
Right.
in 2019, the sham control arm was where they made a superficial scalp incision, didn't drill into the bone or anything like that, and then basically came out and, that was your your sham control. And again, the problem is the sham control did no different at 1 year versus
Okay.
the folks who were getting the deep brain injection. So that's a big problem. So the company then, UniQure, they say, and there's no documentation that this happened, but they say that the FDA said, okay, go ahead, do a single arm trial where you give everyone, all 15, 20, however number of people, give everyone, do this deep brain injection. And then your control arm is just historically matched controls. So match controls, And so you have a matched external control, and then now compare those folks. Now, the problem with matched controls, which any clinician who evaluates or whoever evaluates evidence knows, is that matched controls is really difficult because you can only match for the variables that you're looking for, right? So say, as a good example, you can match for age, race, sex, and net worth over $1 million. Okay, that seems like a pretty good matching, right? Like let's match on those 4 things, right? And those 2 people should be very similar in terms of how they do, correct? But do you know who John Candy, who died at like 46 or something like that, right? Is 45, male, white, and net worth is over $1 million.
Right.
The other guy, who's 45, male, white, and net worth over $1 million is Lance Armstrong. Those are age match controls. Now, again, obviously you're matching, you try to match as much as you can. Maybe they would match on VO2 max to get the difference between those 2 folks seen. But the point is that when you do historical match controls, it's all dependent on how you've matched. And so the problem is you're left with unknown variables that could be different between the 2 arms.
Does the company get to decide how to do the matches?
Yes, the company does that. The company is the one that's like, okay, we've done the match historical control.
So they'll just figure out a way to do the control where it works to show an effect.
Right. I mean, again, if if an ethical company, whatever, but if you look at the slides from UniQure, for the company itself, the historical control arm looks totally different than the sham control arm. So the sham control arm looks very different than the historical control that they have. So that's a red flag. It's like, okay, your historical control, there's something wrong with that, because why is your sham control no different than that? Or at least it raises the possibility there's a problem there, right? And so these UniQure guys and all the folks with positions on it who are constantly commenting at me about UniQure are like, you don't understand historical controls, and there's a 60% benefit in our AMT, AMT is their gene therapy. They're 60% better compared to, it's like you're 60% better compared to the historical control. Historical control, which looks completely unnatural and is like a straight line down, which looks completely unlike what happened to the patients in the sham control arm, right? So again, and by the way, this is a $3 million a year gene therapy that right. requires basically drilling into the brain to inject. So yeah, if I'm a regulator, right, I'm saying exactly what Vinay is saying. Like, okay, guys, you gotta get me some data against a control that isn't this weird historical control arm, which is basic stuff. But of course, the UniQure CEO, the first he hears, the moment he hears that, right, says, screams bloody murder that, oh, somebody at the FDA said, my historical control single arm thing was going to be adequate, and the poor Huntington's disease patients, and he runs to Stat News, Endpoint News, blah blah blah, and then they of course put out this articles about, oh my God, more chaos at the FDA. What are these poor Huntington's disease patients going to do? Again, not talking about the science, just talking about the process of like how it's chaotic and stuff. And so there's this firestorm. There's this firestorm that's created by the UniQure CEO. Oh, and the UniQure CEO also said, this is really important. The UniQure CEO also said to these news reporters, right, that the FDA had demanded that they do another sham control, but the sham control needs to be burr holes and 8-hour surgery, which, and these in quotation journalists never confirmed that. Like, okay, if you hear that from one side, something insane like that, the first thing you do is go to the FDA, be like, do you have a comment on this? Because this is what the UniQure CEO is saying that meeting was. They don't do that. They immediately publish that there's this great Bloomberg, Endpoint News, Stat News. They immediately all repeat what the UniQure CEO said, saying that, oh my God, this crazy FDA, their rogue regulator is demanding this, right? And basically pinning it on, well, Prasad's the CBR head, it must be coming from him, type of thing. So that happens. And again, it's this massive, crap storm that's happening, and there's all this pressure, this pressure is just mounting and mounting. HHS or somebody at HHS or I don't know who, actually, someone must have forced Vinay to then, because the problem is there's only one discussion of the science that's coming out. There's no other counter narrative happening because apparently Vinay is not allowed to talk to the bloody media. And so someone forces someone, Prasad, to go talk to these folks off the record, right? Off the record, call with a bunch of different reporters to talk about the science and why, why just so that you can get that counter narrative out there. Because right now you're only publishing the narrative of the UniQure CEO. And when he does that, again, the coverage is, the coverage from like Stat News and Company is like, this is very irregular that senior FDA staffer is spending 30 minutes ranting against the company. It's like, my God. So then, yeah, he's inviting criticism. Like, what is the guy supposed to do?
Worse than this representative,
right.
Jake Achenschloss.
Oh my God, yes.
Whatever the heck his name. I
Right.
don't want to pronounce it right because he doesn't deserve my respect, frankly, is threatening that both Marty and Vinay committed some crime about whatever. It's gross. It's disgusting. I find this just seems completely, it seems like to me a setup.
Coming from Congress, who is notably crazy in terms of insider trading. Like,
well, wait, now his father himself was accused of using his position of NIAID to make stock trades to profit early on in the pandemic. Again,
yes.
And whatever the point is that like, it just looks like a scam to me. It looks like a setup. Of course, I don't know if it is or whatever. It just looks like it. It looks like it because I can see Prasad. It's just all of the hallmarks, everything he's doing. To me, it looks like a person operating with integrity and principle who is, as you say, just run into a buzzsaw, and the worst possible buzzsaw to go through the gamut of, calling him names. Now we amplify it to he's a sexual harasser, and now he's a criminal.
Right.
I mean, what does this look? Or alternatively, all of these people are not operating in good faith, and they really just want to get this guy out. Presumably, maybe it's because of a profit motive. I don't know. But that position that he holds is a major determinant of whoever's in that spot is a big driver in the value of a lot of biotech companies. That's just the way it is. So the incentive structure sucks. I don't know if it was you or somebody else that suggested that maybe we need to just get rid of this because it places too much power or ability to control markets in the hand of one person or whatever. It does seem like maybe we don't regulate these things. Let people die and sue companies or whatever. I don't know. What I guess this maybe to come back to it. Is it unreasonable to say that this ending that you just described very nicely, he was set up? Somebody wanted him out, and this is the way to do it.
Well, the setup, right? The setup part. Now he does this piece, right? And of course the reporters are forced to, I guess, put out his counter narrative. My God, oh my, and you can tell they're like gritting their teeth, like senior FDA official says this and says that and blah blah blah, right? And you can just tell by the tone of it. It's not like UniQure CEO told us this. Oh my God, look what happened. Here it's like senior FDA official says this and claims this, right? But then, I guess they're stewing, and Achenschloss is saying whatever about criminal charges and stuff, and then the next thing you know, there's a piece in Stat News, right, that basically outs who the senior FDA official is. It says, basically quotes the senior official as being a practicing hematologist oncologist who can't wait to get back to his thing. It's like, okay, and there's a tweet by this guy, this reporter at Stat News, that says, hint, read this article, hint, I'm paraphrasing, read this article to find out who the senior official is.
What's that guy's name? I forget. It's like Adam Firestone.
Adam Feuerstein. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Yeah,
ridiculous.
And that particular article, every other article of Stat News is paywalled. That particular article, hey, this one isn't paywalled. So just so we get, that is such a clear breach, I think. Well, as an outsider, a breach of journalistic ethics. So you're talking about the setup. That and then again, within 12 hours of that happening, there's an announcement made by Marty saying that, Prasad is returning to UCSF after doing a great job for 10 months or something.
His sabbatical, his planned 1-year sabbatical. I would hope maybe, so, okay, the end of this is
Yes.
he's leaving in April. What do we see the next few weeks for him?
I hope
Like,
he
is he?
leaves. I hope he leaves sooner. I want to see him on Substack and back on X, kind of taking these. I mean, taking these people to task. But in answer to your question, yes, I did say, and others have said now already because it's so obvious that better no FDA than this FDA, because this FDA is just a siphon of a siphon from Americans' wallets to bank accounts domestically and internationally. This UniQure company is some Amsterdam company that is making one drug with the idea to get it approved in the U.S. as their big cash cow, right? I
Well,
think
at least the name is honest, right?
Yeah.
UniQure. So we
Right.
got one cure, and it's not even a cure. Okay, so it's half, maybe. Well, it could be. We don't. Well,
Yeah.
we need more sham controls. But
Yeah.
so this is a really important thing. Just to come back to it, the way in which these rare diseases,
Yeah.
and if that's been exposed by Prasad, then that's a really actually quite valuable thing that happened, even though unintentionally, I guess. And the weaponization of the pain and suffering of families of people with these diseases, like that's an aspect of this that's sort of, can you
Yeah.
comment on that? Because I don't.
No, it's 100%. Look, I've been there. I had a daughter who had a failing liver starting at 3 months, and I distinctly, you're desperate. You will like whatever that may possibly, and it doesn't even make sense. You're not even rational, right? Like, I remember giving her higher doses of ursodeoxycholic acid because someone said somewhere on some chat thing that maybe that would help biliary stasis, and and it makes no sense, right? And there's so many things that are done in those desperate circumstances, that because your child is your child or your loved one, or you yourself are dying. You're dying. So yeah, I mean, it is really the best thing you can do, I think, is try to have some type of, you have to have that balance of yes, let's try things, let's not wait for amazing evidence. At the same time, you really want to be careful that you don't abuse that population in that desperate times of need. And the Elvidus story with the gene therapy for muscular dystrophy is an extremely, I think, important warning there, that you don't, like, there are downsides to just trying things. There are boys that may still be alive today that died because of the immune reaction from this thing, and we don't even know really if that therapy works still. So yeah, I think we have to, and so it's a really important point, and unfortunately, anytime you say anything about this, the first thing is like, oh, you don't care about folks with rare diseases. And no, I think the most compassionate thing is to demand some type of evidence to make sure that we're not hurting this community in their time of desperation.
Yeah, and the idea that those patients and families are exploited
Yeah.
by CEOs of companies that are just trying to make money and can claim the high road, the moral high
150%.
road, because certainly this isn't happening all the time, but it is doubtless happening in some of the cases, and maybe in the most recent example that you cite. I mean, it looks like that is really what's happening.
Right.
But it's frustrating. I guess to me, it's just maybe there, no matter who you put in that position that Prasad occupied, no matter how much integrity, whatever, it's just, you're just destined to fail because there's too many opposing, forces that will exert, and they're not all operating in bad faith. I mean, the patients of with rare diseases, they're not, thinking that they're doing anything other than trying to save their lives or save, or their
Right.
families, or trying to save their loved ones. So I don't know. I don't want to be on any sort of soapbox or moral grandstanding here. I just really appreciate you talking about Vinay, and your view as someone with sort of a, obviously you're a doctor. I am not, as you
Right.
might imagine, but I do pretend to be one often when people, but then they realize I just have a PhD. It's kind of like what, anyway.
There's no such thing as just a PhD.
Oh, well. So, okay. So is there any final words or thoughts about what have we learned?
Oh, he's done a huge service in terms of exposing the ecosystem that exists up there, and I think it's clear. It's relatively clear to me at this moment that change is not going to come from within the FDA. Change is not going to come from within that ecosystem. Change is not going to come from the usual journalists like holding truth to power. No, they are all tools of the elite in terms, and everyone is just, Stat News is massively funded by pharma subscribers, and of course all their pharma events are who's sponsoring those. It's like these are not the people that are going to be able to get change. So change has to come from outside, and I think it's a great conversation to have. And the public really needs to wake up to the fact that how this FDA is operating. This FDA is operating for the benefit of companies. Yes, there's going to be some great drugs that come through because it's not like it's if you've got a drug that's a parachute, those drugs are going to get approved by idiot regulators or non-idiot regulators, non-genius, whatever. The issue is that there's a whole host of drugs that are being let through that are either marginally better or don't work. And then of course there's this small rare disease kind of loophole that we also need to close. It needs to be closed. And again, it's not going to happen. I think it's not going to happen internally. It's going to happen. It's going to have to happen externally. And that external way of doing it may be, again, I'm a free market guy, and it hurts to say it, but that external way of doing it may be Medicare, say, dictating price controls, because this can't continue like this.
Explain the loophole there. You're talking about a price like that they can charge exorbitant prices on things.
Yeah. Well, the loophole, what we talked about in terms of rare diseases, right? The rare disease loophole that I think hedge funds and private equity knows about now is that they can exploit the terribleness of what's happening to these folks with these terrible diseases, and what the arbitrage now is no longer, hey, does the science work or not? Is the interest group, is the rare disease group, are they desperate enough? Are they going to put enough pressure is the regulator going to be able to withstand that? These guys are making a very hard, cold calculation that they are not going to be able to withstand that type of public pressure. And because there's no other therapy that's available, they're going to be able to push through a therapy that they're going to price at $3 million a pop and get approved. And again, a company like Sarepta, which produces stuff for muscular dystrophy, that's all they do, right? Their revenues are billions of dollars a year based on that, right? So, it's not, of course, Pfizer or whatever, Bristol Myers or whatnot, but in terms of how many billions they make. But, that's not a bad return on investment for folks. And I think hedge funds know this, private equity knows this. And I think that loophole of this public pressure / to get evidentiary standards, again, nobody's asking for RCTs for people with rare diseases. Literally, Prasad wrote a whole op-ed about that. But there needs to be some basis for evidence that people who know how to evaluate evidence agree with. The other thing I'll say is that it's pretty obvious to me. Again, I was very deferential towards the investor community, thinking that these are folks that spend all their time in this space, and they must be very good and know a lot more about this, and in which they do. They know a lot more about this stuff in terms of details, about certain details in a variety of drugs, but the vast majority of them do not know how to appraise evidence. The vast majority of them are so biased by holding some long position in whatever company that they just cherry pick. They just massively cherry pick and say, no, of course, they keep talking about the 60%. Clearly there's AMT 130, which is for gene therapy that is for Huntington's disease. They keep comparing to the historical control, and they claim that people don't understand statistics. It's like, no, I very much understand matched controls. and the idea that you're gonna approve a drug based on a comparison to a matched control when you have a failed RCT is insane, and you will fail any medical school class that teaches about evaluating trials if you do that. You don't understand it. You're biased. So that retail investor community, or mildly science interested community there that runs around whatever, they are not exactly good, smart players in this place and should generally be ignored.
But I did notice you pushing back with a lot of the people that seem to just have investment positions or like trying to play the stock market, which is what I was thinking. Frankly, I would love to be taking over Prasad's position simply because it seems like a position you can make a lot of money in the stock market if you play your cards right. Sorry, I'm just teasing. But I would say, I got to tell you, who I'd like to see in that position if they don't abolish it. What about you? What about you throw your hat in the ring?
I would last. No, there's no way. I would last like 5 days. I mean, that's the other thing. What person like? What I'm gonna go up there so that you can get rid of me in 10 days and like write
No.
terrible things about me and accuse me of sexual harassment? It's like
Peter
okay.
Marks. That's why he's the perfect guy.
Yes,
like,
Peter
if
Marks.
You
They gotta
just
get
want a
Peter Marks
guy
back.
that's just gonna roll. That's the point. Like it is. Yeah.
Peter Marks is making like music videos about like how you should get your umpteenth booster. So,
Still.
yes. Yeah, COVID
Still.
booster, right? Still, right.
Okay, well, I really appreciate you having this conversation with me, and I'm as someone that just is observing what's going on at the FDA from the outside. I've been appalled and but also inspired, oddly inspired by seeing, again, Prasad, just so impressive. I would hope maybe someday he'll actually have a conversation with me. I have been challenging Andrew Nixon. By the way, you're right. The comms guy at HHS. I'm going to directly say, look, Andrew Nixon, to you, who is not watching this, you're out there with this bluster. You guys got all your videos. You got your Kid Rock and RFK. Why don't you let Prasad have a conversation with somebody? It doesn't have to be me. Maybe you would love to have him on your show, I'm sure, right? Like the Doctor's Lounge Live. Like, wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
But why, I don't know. Like, it seemed like Prasad was done dirty, frankly.
Yeah.
He was done no favors by a lot of people at HHS. And I would maybe even suggest that, I guess I have to be nice to Andrew Nixon because I'm trying to get an interview with people. But I mean, come on. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think if gas was $1 a gallon and if the economy, I don't know, house prices were falling, or I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but meaning the economy was doing well. I'll leave it to economists to decide whether that's a good or bad thing. But I think, and midterms are looking like, oh, they're in the bag type of thing. You didn't have like people dying in Minnesota with ice. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff. And now, of course, there's the Iran war. So you can see that the last thing an administration wants to deal with is like these every week editorials about, oh my God, chaos at the FDA, chaos at the FDA. And so you don't have really political capital. You don't have the political capital you think you have.
Maybe. Well, this is the thing, like the last thing they want to deal with, that's a position of weakness. One of the reasons I was supportive of the current administration was because I thought they didn't give a crap about hit pieces in media, whatever. I actually think this is more reflective of the monetary pressures. There's people, it's not like biotech isn't bad. Like, making money isn't a bad thing. And I know that Trump is a businessman. And I know that, one of the concerns with Kennedy is perhaps that he is bad for the economy because he might suppress the pharmaceutical bit. It's a strange dynamic, but one in which I just would like there to be people operating in good faith and not trashing someone that really just exemplifies principle and integrity. And I guess that's maybe too much to ask, perhaps, but
at this moment, it seems too much to ask.
At this moment, unless they appoint you, in which case I'd be very pleased. But anyway, thanks a lot for joining me on Science from the Fringe. This has been Bryce Nickels with Anish Koka talking about the railroading of Vinay Prasad, who we'll see, I guess, perhaps in about a month back on the podcast circuit. We look forward to that. Until next time, everyone, take care.
Thanks so much, Bryce.